Rain came in waves across the stone-paned windows of Evelyn Ashcroft's office. The university's heating system was wheezing again, so she wrapped her sweater tighter around her shoulders and stared blankly at the stack of ungraded essays. Outside, students in damp trench coats passed like ghosts. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Dr. Ashcroft? The voice was clipped. Male. Businesslike. Yes? This is Charles Ellery. I represent the estate of Margaret Ashcroft. I believe you were her sole living descendant. Evelyn sat up straighter. Margaret Ashcroft is dead? She passed 3 days ago in Devonshire. I'm calling to inform you that under the terms of her will, you are now the legal owner of Thornfield Hollow. Evelyn blinked. That place still exists? She hadn't heard the name Thornfield Hollow in nearly 20 years. Not since she was a teenager, and her mother already half-swallowed by addiction, and silence muttered about never going back to that cursed stone prison. Margaret, Evelyn's grandmother, had long been a figure of myth and fracture in the Ashcroft family. Elegant, tyrannical, cruel in a way that couldn't be explained. Evelyn never knew her personally, but she remembered the photos. A towering woman in widow's black, the grand staircase, and the eyes piercing, always watching. We'll need your signature to transfer the deed, Ellery continued. There are also certain conditions. It would be best if we discussed them in person. Conditions? The manor cannot be sold for 12 months, and it must be inhabited continuously during that time. Evelyn exhaled sharply. That's absurd. I have a job. A lease. Miss Ashcroft, Thornfield is valued conservatively at £4.3 million. The line went quiet. If you decline the terms, the estate goes into trust and is likely to be absorbed by the Crown under dormancy law. I don't believe your grandmother wanted that. Evelyn didn't answer right away. That night, she pulled her mother's old tin box from the back of her closet. Inside were scattered photos, receipts, and one yellowing postcard. The image was familiar. Thornfield Hollow. Viewed from a distant gray stone under gray skies. Ivy climbing its throat. On the back, written in tight slanted cursive. One day you'll understand. Monsieur A. Evelyn didn't sleep. 3 days later, she stood at the iron gates of Thornfield Hollow. It looked exactly like the postcard, only worse. The hedges were wild, the windows dusty, the sky overhead a sullen shade of ash. But even decaying, the manor loomed with dignity like an old queen who had been waiting for someone to remember her name. You've arrived, Charles Ellery said, checking his watch. He was lean, graying, and wore a pinstripe suit as if Thornfield were a courtroom. He handed her a folder and a heavy antique key. This will open the front door. The other locks will reveal themselves when necessary. That's cryptic, she said. So is the house. Inside, the air smelled of damp pages and forgotten roses. Dust motes floated like suspended memories. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister carved with vines and eyes. Evelyn swore they almost blinked when the door creaked closed. She walked slowly, fingertips grazing the wallpaper. Deep burgundy velvet with tiny thorn patterns. Paintings of women she didn't recognize lined the hall. All with the same eyes. In the drawing room, she found a fire already set. I had someone prepare the essentials, Ellery said, appearing behind her. Electricity is unreliable, but the manor favors firelight anyway. What does that mean? Evelyn asked. He only smiled. It's an old house, Miss Ashcroft. It remembers what it wants, and what it keeps. By midnight, Evelyn had unpacked 2 suitcases and a box of books. She chose a bedroom on the west wing, where the wallpaper was a fading forest green, and the bed still smelled faintly of lavender. Her mother once mentioned this room, said it was hers before everything went wrong. Outside, the wind picked up. Trees moaned against the window panes. She tried to read, but the words wouldn't settle. Something about the silence in Thornfield wasn't natural. It wasn't the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, it was the quiet of something watching. At 3:12 a.m., she woke suddenly. The fireplace had gone out, but the room was still warm. And there, on her nightstand, was a journal she hadn't placed there. Black leather, gold trim, no dust. Inside. The first entry. The 14th of January. She's returned. I can feel her. No signature. No explanation. She flipped to the next page. It was blank, but ink began to bleed across it, curling like smoke. I never left, Evelyn. She slammed it shut. The wind howled louder now. From down the corridor, a door creaked. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stood. Just outside her room, the gas lamps flickered to life one by one, as if guiding her. Down the hall. Toward the library. She followed them. The door to the library stood open barely. Inside, towering shelves stretched to the ceiling. She stepped in slowly, each footfall muffled by the velvet carpet. And there, on the central table, was a photo of her mother, as a child, eyes wide, mouth slightly parted, standing next to Margaret, who stared straight into the lens with a hand on the girl's shoulder. And behind them, a woman Evelyn didn't recognize, faded and ghost-like, partially transparent, standing in the shadows by the curtains. She hadn't seen her at first, but now she couldn't unsee her. Evelyn turned to leave, and the door closed behind her. By itself. The door didn't slam. It closed with eerie precision, firm, quiet, final. Evelyn froze. Her fingers hovered inches from the knob. She turned it quickly. It opened again. No lock. No resistance. Just strange timing. She stepped out of the library and into the hallway. Breath held. The gas lamps lining the corridor still glowed dimly, a trail of flickering orange, as if waiting to guide her back. But when she turned toward her bedroom, one of the lights blinked and died. Then another, until the entire wing was cloaked in darkness. Evelyn stood completely still, her heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. She clenched the journal in her hand, the one that had appeared on her nightstand, and looked back at the library. The photo was gone, the table bare. She spent the rest of the night in the drawing room, curled up in an armchair beside the fire, the journal clutched like a shield. She didn't sleep. Not really. At dawn, she made tea in the old copper kettle. The kitchen was oddly modernized. Someone had installed a new stove, a reliable water line. She appreciated the touch of reality amid the whispers of the manor. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone had been in the room with her all night, watching. Later that morning, she called Charles Ellery. "There's a journal." "It wrote to me. I didn't imagine it." There was a pause. "Miss Ashcroft, Thornfield Hollow is very old. Some families pass down furniture. Yours passed down memory. History has a way of staying attached to places, especially when no one asks it to leave. You're saying the house is haunted. I'm saying the house remembers." Before she could argue, he added, "There's something else you should know. Margaret's will references a sealed room. It wasn't in the original floor plans, and no key was ever found. What's in it?" She didn't say. Only that it should never be opened unless you feel strong enough to confront what your family spent decades avoiding. "Where is it?" "Somewhere in the East Wing." "Hidden." Evelyn hung up and stared at the wall across from her. Margaret's portrait hung there, her eyes, just like Evelyn's, just like her mother's, staring slightly to the left. Not straight ahead. Not at the viewer, but to the side. At something. She spent the next 3 days searching. The East Wing was colder than the rest of the house. The windows were narrower, the carpets more threadbare, the paintings older and darker in tone. One hallway led to another, and then another like a maze that had no center. She tapped the walls for hollow spaces, studied floorboards, traced her fingertips over old wallpaper. Found nothing. Until the fourth night, she was walking back to the stairwell when she saw it. A light. Not a lamp. A flicker bluish-white, like moonlight caught in motion seeping from the seams of a wall panel between two faded paintings. She approached slowly. There was no door, no visible line. But when she pressed her palm against the panel, something shifted. A hiss, a whisper, and the wall clicked inward. It revealed a narrow passage. No lights, just cold stone and the faint smell of roses and earth. She stepped inside. The air thickened around her. The moment she crossed the threshold, the journal in her hand vibrated slightly. She flipped it open. Another sentence had appeared. "You're not the first Ashcroft to walk this hall." She kept walking. At the end of the corridor was a door. Blackened oak, reinforced with iron bands. No handle, just a keyhole and beside it, etched into the wood in faint but flowing script. "To open is to remember." Evelyn felt her breath hitch. "But I don't have a key," she whispered. And the door replied. The keyhole glowed faintly. And the door clicked. Not open, not wide, but unlocked. She pushed gently. Inside was a circular room. Domed ceiling. Bookshelves stretching upward. Dust hung in golden beams of light, breaking through a stained glass skylight above. But what caught her attention wasn't the architecture. It was the chair, and the woman seated in it. White dress. Pale hands. Head tilted, as if asleep. Her skin looked too perfect, too still. Evelyn took a step forward. The woman's eyes opened, and Evelyn's blood ran cold. "You look just like Margaret," the woman whispered. "Who are you?" Evelyn asked, voice shaking. The woman stood. Her movement was graceful but off like a puppet that had just remembered how to walk. "I was the first, and the last, and now you're here." "Here for what?" "To finish what she couldn't." The lights above pulsed. The books rustled, and the woman's smile curved. "Thornfield has been waiting for you, Evelyn." "Why?" "Because only one Ashcroft at a time may know the truth." She reached forward and pressed something into Evelyn's palm. A locket. Inside, 2 portraits. Margaret and Evelyn's mother. And in the center a symbol Evelyn had never seen. An eye. Surrounded by thorns. The woman stepped back. "When the house chooses, it doesn't ask. It remembers." And with that, she vanished. Evelyn staggered out of the room. Locket clenched tight in her fist and ran back down the corridor. When she turned to look back, the passage was gone, sealed behind stone, and the journal now read, "Now you've begun." The locket felt hot in Evelyn's palm, as though it had pulsed with life since she left the hidden chamber. She couldn't sleep. Not just from fear but from something deeper, a tension that curled through her like a memory she couldn't reach. Thornfield Hollow wasn't just holding secrets, it was waking them. The next morning, the sky hung low and silver. Rain tapped on the windows like knuckles on glass. Evelyn stood in the foyer, staring up at the portrait of Margaret Ashcroft again. She held the locket close to her chest and whispered, "What did you do to this place?" The portrait didn't answer, but the house creaked. She opened the journal again. A new entry had written itself. "Before the house opened to you, it opened to her." Margaret entered the mirror room on the 7th night. She didn't come out the same. Evelyn frowned. "What mirror room?" There was no reply. She searched the east wing again, nothing. Then the west. Then the attic. Still nothing. Until, by chance, she passed by a hallway on the main floor she could have sworn hadn't been there before. It was narrow. The wallpaper peeled. At the end stood a pair of double door stall, carved with spiraling vines that met at a single, oval shape in the center. A mirror. She opened the doors. The room inside was circular, dim, silent, and mirrors lined every wall. Some were tall and cracked, others small and ornate. None of them reflected her properly. They showed slightly off versions of herself, her posture bent differently, her hair falling on the wrong side, her expression blank even when she moved. She stepped toward the largest one, in the center. It didn't reflect her at all. Instead, it showed a different room entirely, a bedroom she'd never seen, and a girl around 9 years old, standing in the middle of it, weeping silently. Evelyn blinked. The girl looked like her mother. The girl turned, slowly, as if sensing Evelyn through the mirror. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and she mouthed one word, "Run." Suddenly, the room behind the mirror flickered, and a shadow stepped into Framatol, faceless, with the outline of Margaret's silhouette. The mirror cracked. Evelyn stumbled back. Every mirror in the room groaned, not shattered, but stretched, like liquid glass flexing inward, trying to pull something through. She turned to run, but the door had vanished. The journal in her coat pocket writhed. She pulled it out. The pages flipped violently on their own until one stilled. A sentence appeared. "The house keeps what it doesn't trust." "What does that mean?" Evelyn hissed, her breath fogging in the cold. Another sentence formed. "The mirrors are memories, some not your own. To leave, you must find what is yours." She looked up, and every mirror now showed a version of her life. A different room. A different Evelyn. One mirror showed her standing at a lectern, lecturing students in an auditorium. Another showed her curled on a couch, holding a baby. Another her in a hospital room, holding her dying mother's hand. But only one mirror showed a reflection that moved with her. Not ahead of her. Not behind. She stepped closer. It showed her sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom, drawing in a sketchbook. Her mother stood in the doorway, tired, pale but smiling. She touched the mirror. It shattered, but not into shards. It opened like a doorway. She stepped through, and found herself not in the sketch, not in the past, but back in Thornfield. The hallway, the door behind her gone. She was out. But something had changed. She could feel it in the walls, and when she returned to the drawing room, the fire was already lit. On the mantel, a box now sat. She hadn't placed it there. Inside was a single photograph. Her mother, standing on the front lawn of Thornfield as a teenager. But someone had scratched out the face of the woman beside her, and written on the back, in looping black ink, "There is another. One who never left." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She lit every candle she could find, and sat with the journal open in front of her. No new messages appeared. Just the one it had left earlier. Some memories are not your own. The next morning, the manor was strangely quiet. No birds, no wind. Just the tick of a grandfather clock somewhere deep in the house. Evelyn opened the locket again. Two faces stared back. Margaret. And Evelyn's mother. But the center, the symbol, the eye wrapped in thorns now, glowed faintly. It was no longer just engraved metal. It was watching. And it was waking up. The silence in Thornfield Hollow was never just silence. It was listening. Evelyn learned this by the fourth week, when footsteps echoed behind her with no shoes to cast them, and shadows shifted faster than the sun. The house was old. Yes, but it was too aware. Too responsive. She started keeping the locket on at all times. Every time her fingers brushed its surface, the thorned eye in the center shimmered faint, pulsing like a heartbeat just beneath the metal. That morning, it burned cold against her skin. The photograph still sat on the mantel, her mother and a woman whose face had been violently scratched out, the ink on the back. There is another, one who never left. She turned the journal's page. A new message had formed. She lived in silence, but the walls still remember her name. "Who is she?" Evelyn whispered aloud. Another line wrote itself slowly. "Find the room behind the nursery. Find her voice." The nursery. She had passed it once, a small room at the end of the north corridor, with old toys stacked neatly on dust-covered shelves. A faded rocking horse stood still in the corner, its paint peeling like bark from a tree. Now she entered again. And something was different. A single lullaby music box had begun to play. Its melody was warped, metallic, and distant, yet familiar. Evelyn felt the tune vibrate against her bones, as if she'd heard it once, long ago. Before memory took shape, she turned slowly to the far wall. There was a wardrobe pushed up against the plaster. Not just storage. A door. Hidden. She pulled it aside. Behind the wardrobe, a narrow door waited. No knob. No lock. Just a series of symbols etched into the wood thorn patterns, spiral motifs. And in the center, a carved eye. The same one from the locket. As her fingers touched it, the wood sighed. The door creaked open. The room behind the nursery was narrow, with low ceilings and bare stone walls. No windows, no lights. But the moment she stepped in, candles ignited one by one, casting shadows that danced like specters. It was a chamber, a hidden one, and along the far wall were drawings, hundreds of them, scratched directly into the stone with charcoal and fingernails. Faces. Women. Crying. Screaming. Fading. All had eyes dark, exaggerated, and mouths twisted in silence. But one stood out, drawn larger than the rest. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, and scrawled beneath her was a name: Clara Ashcroft. Evelyn stepped back, heart racing. She had never heard that name before. Never in the family tree. Never in Margaret's will. Nowhere. And yet, the walls knew it. The drawings whispered it. And as she turned to leave, she saw one more thing. A journal. Thin, worn, covered in gray lace. She opened it. The pages were blank. Until the ink began to bleed through. I was her sister. She told everyone I was mad. But Margaret was afraid of the truth. So she locked me here, with the walls. Evelyn gasped. She flipped to the next page. She sealed my name. Erased it from records. From memory. But the house remembered. It always does. Another page. You wear the eye now. You carry the key. And so it begins again. She staggered out of the hidden room, journal pressed to her chest. In the nursery, the music box had stopped. Silence returned. But it was no longer passive. It was waiting. That night, Evelyn researched in the library. Thornfield's family ledger, hidden behind a loose stone panel, listed only one daughter under Margaret's father. Margaret. No Clara. But the dates didn't align. A 7-year gap. A name erased. The next morning, the locket burned again. She opened it. The symbol glowed brighter than ever. And for the first time, a third portrait had begun to appear. Slowly. Faintly, an outline forming. Not just Margaret. Not just Evelyn's mother. But someone else. And then, in the corner of her room, she heard a breath. A low exhale. She turned. And saw a woman standing there. Pale. Eyes dark. Dress torn. The same face from the drawing. Clara? Evelyn asked. The woman didn't speak. She only raised one hand and pointed to the locket, then vanished. Evelyn collapsed onto the bed, trembling. The house was not just haunted. It was rewriting its own story, and she was part of the ink. It rained for 2 days straight after Clara appeared. Thunder pressed against the walls like a fist. Lightning peeled the sky open every few hours. Thornfield Hollow groaned under it all, as if the storm came not from the sky but from within. Evelyn didn't leave her room much. She kept the journal Clara had left close, rereading the trembling handwriting over and over again. She told everyone I was mad. She locked me here. With the walls. There were no dates, no last name. But the drawing in the stone chamber, the sudden appearance of Clara's face in the locket, it was real. Too specific to be illusion. She knew now. Clara Ashcroft had existed, and Margaret had erased her. The journal's next page appeared during the second night of the storm. I tried to warn your mother. She heard me through the mirror, but she was too afraid to speak. Evelyn shivered as she read. That mirrored room, the girl who mouthed run, had that been her mother? Had Clara tried to reach her too? Why me? Evelyn whispered. A new sentence formed. Because you listened. That morning, Evelyn stood before the locket again. The third portrait had sharpened. Clara's eyes were not like Margaret's cold, clever. They were wide, open, sad, but powerful. She went to the nursery again, heart pounding. The wardrobe hadn't moved. Behind it, the hidden door. But this time, the passage was dark. No candles lit. No whispers. Just a stone-cold silence. Evelyn stepped inside. The drawings were still there. But something new had appeared on the wall, freshly etched. Not madness, memory. And beneath it, a spiral pattern carved deep into the stone. The same spiral that now glowed on the back of the locket. Evelyn touched it. The stone shifted, and a second door opened. Behind it, a stairwell descended, carved not by architects, but by hands, desperate to escape. She descended slowly, flashlight trembling. The staircase led to a hidden chamber beneath Thornfield. A music room, But not any music room this one had. Instruments shattered in corners, sheet music half burned, and strange chalk symbols drawn in circles on the wooden floor. In the center stood a phonograph. Still whole. Still wound. Evelyn approached. There was a vinyl already in place. Handwritten label. Clara, October 1897. She pressed the needle down. Crackling. Silence. Then, a voice. Her voice. My name is Clara Ashcroft. If you're hearing this, it means the house finally let me speak. The voice was clear, young, but steady. Margaret found my letters. She tore them up. She sealed me in the walls. She said I was dangerous. But I only ever told the truth. Evelyn swallowed hard. They wanted a perfect lineage. Margaret couldn't stand the idea that I saw too much. Felt too much. She said I was contaminated. That if I didn't disappear, the Ashcroft name would rot. So she locked me below. She said the house would forget me. But it didn't. And now you found me. The recording stopped. The air went still. Evelyn sat beside the phonograph for a long time, not speaking. Her chest ached. Grief for someone she never knew and anger at the woman who'd made Thornfield a mausoleum of secrets. Clara's story had been buried in stone and silence. Until now, when she returned to her room, a new line had formed in Clara's journal. I never wanted revenge, only to be known. That night, Evelyn stood at the grand staircase, the same one Margaret had once posed in for old photographs. The portraits of the Ashcroft women lined the walls, each name etched in brass: Margaret, Rosalind, Beatrice. But now, a new portrait had appeared at the bottom, a young woman with wild hair and soft eyes. Clara. No plaque. No frame. Just a portrait pinned to the wall with a single thorn. Evelyn stepped closer, reached out. And from the shadows behind her, a whisper rose barely a breath. Thank you. The locket warmed against her chest. The spiral symbol faded. And the eye? For the first time, it closed. The eye on the locket had closed. It didn't blink. Didn't fade. It simply stopped watching. Evelyn stood at the foot of the grand staircase, the whisper of thank you still lingering in the air like the last note of a lullaby. The portrait of Clara remained where it had not been hours before, unframed, unpolished, and impossibly real. The house had acknowledged her, and that changed everything. The next morning, the manor creaked in unfamiliar ways. Windows that had stayed locked for years swung open to the spring wind. A skylight Evelyn hadn't noticed before now cast beams of golden light into the central corridor. The house was breathing differently, freer, but it wasn't over. In the library, the journal opened to a fresh page. Clara's handwriting now steadier, less frantic. You've opened the wound, but healing requires more than truth. What else is left? Evelyn asked aloud. Another line appeared. The final key. You must return to the place Margaret ended everything. Where? There was a long pause. Then, the Ashcroft crypt. Evelyn had seen the crypt once, in an old black and white photograph inside Margaret's desk drawer. A mausoleum behind the orchard, surrounded by weeping willows. She'd thought it was a myth. Apparently not. By noon, she was standing at the edge of the grounds, boots sinking into soft moss, the wind biting at her cheeks. The orchard was barely alive, but the path to the crypt was clear as though the trees had bent themselves back in anticipation of her arrival. At the end of the clearing stood a low stone structure, half sunken into the earth. Its door was carved with the Ashcroft crest, the thorned eye, and below it, a phrase in Latin, Veritas non perit, truth does not perish. The door was heavy but not locked. It opened with a groan like the throat of a dying beast. Inside, rows of tombs lined the stone chamber. Margaret's name was etched cleanly on the furthest one. Margaret Everly Ashcroft. 1901. 1983. Beloved matriarch. Guardian of lineage. But beside it was a narrow, unmarked stone slab. No name, no date. Nothing. Yet the air around it was colder. Still, Evelyn touched the slab. The locket warmed instantly, and the eye closed just a day ago opened again. She dropped to her knees as a wave of dizziness passed through her. Images flooded her mind like dreams she hadn't dreamt. A girl locked in a stone room, screaming with no sound. Margaret speaking to a council of men in dark robes. A ritual beneath the house, binding memory to silence. Evelyn's mother watching it all, turning away. She gasped. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a choice made, again and again. By generations of Ashcroft women protect the name, no matter the cost. Even if it meant burying the truth alive. The locket pulsed once more. The unmarked slab shifted. And underneath a wooden box. Inside, a single envelope, sealed in red wax, and a small iron key. She opened the envelope. To the final daughter of Thornfield, if you found this, the house has chosen you. I buried Clara because I feared her truth would unravel everything we built. But in doing so, I sealed our legacy in shame. If you choose to forgive us, destroy the key. If you choose to finish what Clara began, open the last door. Margaret Ashcroft. The last door. But where? Back at the manor, Evelyn didn't speak. She went straight to the east wing, past the nursery, past the sealed passage, back to the mirror room. The mirrors had changed. They didn't show fractured timelines anymore. They all reflected Evelyn. Her now. Her whole. In the center of the room, where the largest mirror once stood, was a door. Iron. And etched into its surface. The eye, open wide, surrounded by flames. At its base, a keyhole. Evelyn held the iron key. Her hands trembled. If I open this, nothing will be the same, she whispered. The house was silent, but the locket grew warm, then hot. It wanted her to continue. She slid the key in, turned, and the door opened. Behind it, a staircase spiraling downward. Red stone. Flickering gaslight. She descended. The air thickened with every step, like the walls were pressing inward. At the base was a circular room, and in the center, a mirror, cracked but whole. This one didn't reflect at all. It absorbed. A voice not spoken, but felt filled the chamber. Will you carry us? Will you remember us? Evelyn stepped closer. The mirror glowed. Clara's voice echoed. To be known is to be set free. Margaret's voice followed. To forget is to survive. And then silence. Evelyn reached out and touched the mirror. A rush of wind. 1,000 whispers. And the glass shattered not into shards, but into light. The entire chamber dissolved into brightness. She didn't scream. She remembered. When Evelyn awoke, she was lying in the drawing room. The fire crackled softly. The storm had passed. The locket lay beside her, broken open, the eye gone. But around her neck now hung a new charm. A spiral. A thorn. A flame. The house had changed. Its silence now peaceful. Its air. Light. She walked the halls and every mirror reflected her fully. Every door opened without resistance. In the library, the journal had stopped writing. Its last line. Legacy rewritten. 3 weeks passed. The locket was gone, shattered, scattered, never found again. But Evelyn still felt it sometimes. Not the weight of metal, but the absence of what it once held. Memory. Grief. Warning. Power. The spiral pendant remained at her throat, a subtle talisman, forged not of gold, but of what was remembered. Thornfield Hollow had changed. Not drastically, not visually, but its air was gentler, the silence, restful. The hallways no longer whispered unless she wished to listen. There were still cold corners, still rooms that creaked in the night. But they no longer felt hostile. They felt honest. Evelyn now spent mornings in the library, surrounded by books Margaret had sealed off, and Clara had never been allowed to touch. She began cataloging the Ashcroft archive herself, rebuilding what had been erased, misfiled, or deliberately hidden. She found documents dating back to the late 1700s, receipts, letters, even early trial records implicating the family in land disputes and whispered rituals. But most valuable were the pages she began writing on her own. Clara's history, written in Evelyn's voice. No longer a ghost. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived. It came from the solicitor Charles Ellery, sealed with red wax. Inside, per your full completion of Margaret Ashcroft's stipulations, the estate of Thornfield Hollow is now irrevocably and solely yours. There are no remaining conditions. The manor and all that it holds belongs to you. Signed, Charles Ellery, executor of the Ashcroft estate. Beneath the signature was a single handwritten note. Most heirs ask how to escape the house. You're the first who asked how to understand it. C.E. That night, Evelyn lit a fire in the drawing room. No haunting. No sudden wind. Just warmth. On the mantel, the photograph had changed again. Clara's face was now fully visible, not scratched, not hidden. She smiled gently beside Evelyn's mother. Margaret stood behind them both, her face unreadable. Yet even in oil paint, Evelyn sensed something had softened. As if time, once locked in anger, had begun to forgive. She stood, walked slowly through the house for what felt like the 100th time. Each step, a goodbye. Or maybe not goodbye, maybe release. The nursery remained untouched. The mirror room still housed its empty frames. But now, the cracked mirror that once absorbed memory was replaced with a window. Open. Sunlight spilled in through it like a silent promise. At dawn, Evelyn packed one suitcase. Not because she was fleeing, because she was ready. She stood on the manor's front steps as the morning fog rolled back from the hills. She didn't know where she would go. Not yet. But she knew what she would take with her. Clara's voice, Margaret's warnings, and a story that no longer hid in mirrors and stone. Before she left, she locked the front door, not to seal it, but to keep it safe. She placed the iron key back beneath the stone owl statue beside the gate, exactly where she'd once found a box of dead roses as a child on her only visit here. Only this time, she left something else with it. A note, folded in half, handwritten, addressed not to the dead but to whoever came next. The house will try to remember you. Let it. But do not lie to it. It has been lied to enough. E.A. She turned, walked away. And for the first time, Thornfield Hollow let her go. No locked doors. No closing walls. No names erased. Just silence. Real silence. Evelyn didn't look back. She didn't have to. The house at last had spoken, and she had listened.